Hello and welcome to The Formula. I'm Kelly McCarran, and today we're discussing the tweens and the teens with their skincare routines. And I've got former editor-in-chief of Elle Australia, Justine Cullen, in with me today because she's just a wealth of knowledge and she's literally been front row to watch this shift from magazines dictating to 10-year-olds telling you that they need retinol when they absolutely don't. So let's dive straight in. You recently wrote this really brilliant Substack, which we will link in the show notes, about how tweens are completely skipping the basics and diving straight into retinol and peptides, like, 10-step routines. What did you notice happening and when? Because I'm sure you are the same that when I was a teenager, I was lucky if I remembered to cleanse properly. And I mean, I had awful acne, so it's just like, I was probably even better than the average person, but I certainly was not doing a 10-step routine, and I certainly went through a very awkward stage, and awkward's been kind.
Look, 10's not a great age, I think, for most people, is it? When I used to shoot children, I'd always be like, let's not do the 10-year-olds. Your teeth are too big for your face. And, it's a whole situation. But I mean, I suppose the phenomenon of of the Sephora tween, that's been around for a while now. We're in our maybe third year of that, which is really interesting. And for me, when I write about beauty now, I spend a long time as a beauty editor, but I try to really focus on not so much just aesthetics and product, but how does this trend fit into a wider context? What does it say about how we're feeling now? What does it say about what's going on socially? And so it is it's an interesting trend. And I personally think that the reason this has had so much traction and the reason it seems to be going nowhere is just because the world is getting more and more chaotic. I think that all of us, but especially tweens, are probably looking for a little bit of a um, bit of coping mechanism, some sort of distraction from this wider world. I think if you're 10 years old and you're looking at the news and your mum's upset because of this thing that a politician has said, or that the distraction of, oh, look at this is pretty. And also keeping in mind that this is a generation that were little kids growing up with us during the pandemic, when we were all at home doing 10-step skincare routines because we had the time to and we were bored. I think that, it's imitation. That's how it's always been. Little kids have always imitated the next generation up. Um,
And they're desperate to grow up.
the difference now, I think, is that it's become a feedback loop because of the power of TikTok. They have this unbelievable purchasing power. So now, instead of us just aspiring to our sister's perfume or our mum's lipstick, the brands are marketing to them, and so it has become this cycle of it's just being perpetuated more and more.
What do you think about that? Like, how do you think it's healthy long term that these kids are growing up online and in front of the camera? And because I'm what you just said about the news, when I was 10, I didn't really know what was happening in the world. Like, I was being distracted by playing, and I'm sure I was trying to grow up in my own regard, and I definitely wore short skirts and mum's lipstick and was interested in boys and all those sorts of things, but I definitely wouldn't have been aware to the same extent of the awful atrocities in the world.
I mean, I definitely think this generation are, and I think that they are constantly looking for, ways to kind of to soothe themselves.
Mm.
That's not unique to that age group either. I think we're all looking for, little treat culture is so enormous now. It's how we all cope, and this idea that, oh well, the world is burning, and I'm hearing all about, a climate crisis, and I can't do much about it, but here's this pretty thing that I can look at somewhere else, and this can soothe me in the moment. I think that's pretty universal right now. But it is a scary thing, and there's been lots of pearl clutching over Sephora tweens, but I think we pearl clutch in the wrong direction. It's misdirected. So a lot of it's been about, yes, they're using actives and they're being influenced by these maybe slightly older influencers who are looking for engagement. So they're talking about products that do more exciting things than SPF or just a gentle cleanser and a moisturizer. So they're jumping right ahead, and we're worried about that, and we should be worried about that. Obviously, we want our kids' skin barriers to be healthy and all of those kinds of things. But I think the pearl clutching needs to be about, you know, how are we setting our children up on a path of capitalism, on a purchasing path from such a young age. We are essentially sort of soft onboarding them into a world where they can just be marketed to constantly. And I think that that is a worry. It's like girlhood used to be, as you just mentioned, girlhood, it was a phase of life. It was, probably the most important phase in setting up who you were going to be. And now girlhood is just a marketing demographic. And I think that that's pretty scary. Um,
Also quite insular if they're just at home filming themselves doing a skincare routine instead
yeah.
of at a slumber party or the things that we did at the same age.
But I think that's probably less about beauty itself and more just about social in general. Like we have somehow permitted our young girls to be opened up to these huge corporations who really just kind of want to trap them in a place where they're constantly being told that their only value, and they can see that value directly in likes and engagement, is in how they look or how they present themselves. And I think that's a much, the obsession with beauty is one part of that problem, but social media for young people is much bigger.
One part of this particular Substack that I found so interesting with this discussion was about the prices. And you didn't outright sort of say it. It was more like alluded to that, because if a brand sort of wants to promote to adults, because the brands like Sol de Janeiro and Drunk Elephant are now targeted towards younger people, and they're sitting maybe between $60 and $100, that brands that want to appeal to grown-ups need to price themselves even higher so that they're seen as an adult brand.
Well, the tween market, the early teen and tween market, kind of owns accessible beauty now. If you are something that is well priced and fun and a bit playful and not too serious, you're probably marketing at young people. And we've all had that experience of walking into Mecca or any beauty store and having, it's like being in a school playground sometimes. It's a real bombardment of youth. But I think that there have been some instances, Drunk Elephant's a great example, where they have struggled over the past couple of years because people saw them as a young person's brand, as a kid's brand. And so the big part, the people in the middle moved away from them. So, it sort of wasn't necessarily a sustainable business model. But, I think if you put this into a historical context, and, this is maybe going off on a little bit of a tangent, but historically, there's always been the elites have always set the beauty standards. So, with the Industrial Revolution, it used to be that if you had pale skin, it meant that you didn't have to toil in the fields. And then the Industrial Revolution gave rise to a new leisure class. And Coco Chanel famously went on holiday and came back with a tan. And suddenly that meant that a tan didn't mean you toiled in the fields. It meant that you were part of this new leisure class. Same with, even more recently, filler and Botox and all sorts of injectables became much more accessible, much more affordable. So all of a sudden, what are rich people obsessed with? Facelifts, much more invasive surgeries, things that are just that bit out of reach. And that's just how beauty standards have always moved. That's how they've always evolved. And I think in this instance, where you've got brands that are just constantly speaking to the young, and we are as a society completely obsessed with youth right now. You've got tech bros who are trying to live forever, and Kris Jenner with the face that she had 30 years ago, or didn't even have 30 years ago maybe, but we're so obsessed with youth that at some point I think there's a certain class of person who is going to be saying, I need something that they can't have. I'll never have youth, but I can afford a $250 lipstick and they probably can't. Or I can afford a $25,000 perfume and they can't. And so, that was sort of, I guess, always going to be how it would work. There would always become this shift where, as the market goes younger, some people will find a way to push it in a different direction.
It just seems crazy to me, though, because $250 on a lipstick, no matter your income, seems barbaric. And I understand the point of it and the lipstick effect, but I also think it's scary and sad, and that does sound pearl clutching, but Mecca isn't accessible to the majority of people with tweens or teens. Like,
And I mean, I don't know. I think I had also written in the same edition of the newsletter that Ulta, which is a Sephora competitor in the US, that they're now having tween birthday parties in store. And the
Yeah.
idea of us, I guess, embedding our milestone moments, our emotional, pivotal childhood core memories with capitalism. And it is, of course, it's always been, you've always had a Christmas birthday list. There's always been capitalism with these things, but in such a direct way to
Mm.
embed those things together. Um, it does make me, I mean, it makes me very nostalgic for a simpler time.
Yeah, because when there's a market for it, then you also don't want your kid, I guess, to be the one that's left out or bullied, or if they really want their birthday party there and all their friends are, of course, then that becomes the norm.
Well, I think we have to be careful too. It's similar to gaming, I think, and the expert advice on gaming has always been like, you can't fight it. Like, don't
Mm.
don't fight gaming. Don't put up, resistance to it. What you need to do as a parent is to get involved and to, be there, understand the rules, understand how the game is moderated so that you can navigate it, more carefully with your child. And to a degree, I think that, there's an element of that we can do with this as well, where if you can be more involved, you can suggest them to more affordable products, more appropriate products. You can understand ingredients a little bit more. However, the flip side of this is that any time that we are associating self care purely with consumerism, purely with something that you can buy, we're giving them the wrong coping mechanisms.
Mm.
Like, that's one part of it, sure, but also go for a swim, go and, touch grass or read a book. I interviewed some teenagers a couple of years ago for a story, and I was asking them what they do when they're anxious or stressed. And nearly every single one of them said, go home, do my skincare. And I found that so fascinating because that was just not a sentence that,
No.
a 14-year-old would have ever said in the past. Maybe makeup because it was playful and fun. But to do your skincare, that's invisible labor, unless
Mm.
it's, the eye patches that have a status, that have a label on them and you can post about it. But that's a very interesting way to self-soothe. And it would be great if we could, sure, that can be an element, but there are a million other things I'd love for them to be doing as well.
Mm. You were running magazines when they were the primary way that people were getting information
Oh,
about things
such
like
good days.
things about beauty. And the beauty editors were the trusted voices. Now all of these kids are bypassing dermatologists to follow a 22-year-old on TikTok. What does that do to consumer trust? And are brands just scrambling to keep up with whatever's trending on someone's For You page, or, trying to target different algorithms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely, of course, it's influencers over traditional media, and definitely not experts now, because I think everyone thinks that they're an expert, and that's probably, a chicken and egg situation as well, because there's distrust of all experts in media. So it's which one came first. Um, I I find it so fascinating that, I mean, the influencers are so powerful now in this space. I don't know if you saw, a few weeks ago, an influencer in the States, who has a brand, Sincerely Yours, launched and had 80,000 people show up to a shopping center,
Oh,
which
that's
is like, that's
terrifying.
Justin Bieber
Yeah,
category.
that's terrifying.
Yeah, 80,000 people showed up for this 15-year-old influencer and her skincare brand. Um, and, you know, there is power in that. Weirdly, I don't know, how old is your son?
3.
3. I mean, my youngest is 6, and I find him coming home and saying things that have, he obviously has no social media, he's not on YouTube, but he will come home with, he's saying 6, 7 all the time now, because he's influenced by, there might be a kid who's got an older brother, or, a cooler older kid who's talking to them. So they're influencers now. They
What
don't
is
even need
6,
to be on
7?
social. Oh, we can't get into that conversation.
Okay.
It's a
I'll have a Google afterwards. I'll have a Google.
6,
I'll
7 is the most painful thing that any parent who has a child between the ages of, I guess, 6 and 16 is experiencing right
Okay.
now.
Thank God that I don't know what it means
You're
then,
not there
apparently.
yet. Hopefully, it will be over by the time you get there, although it feels like it's been going on forever. But they do come home. I think their biggest influences now are themselves. It's somehow circulating, within each other, and that's really scary. I mean, there are, you know, there's lots of evidence that tweens and teens are refusing to use SPF now. They're all really into tanning. They track, as we know, they track the UV for the wrong reasons and get out when it's really hot. And so I think what is happening there is like it doesn't even matter what the experts are saying because they're seeing themselves as the experts. They think that wearing sun protection is going to give them acne, and as we know, their skin is the most important thing to them. So yeah, it's a dangerous. It's ripe for misinformation. It's a dangerous time, but I do think that the influence is coming not necessarily from big influencers in the immediacy. It's coming from themselves.
Mm. It's it's hard to comment, like it's hard to sort of talk about it without sounding, in your words, like pearl clutching, because it does just feel like I'm a boomer going, oh, they should be outside playing. Why are they doing their 10-step skin routine on TikTok? But it does seem insidious.
But we can't pearl clutch when it's our fault. I think we can be concerned and we need to do something about it, but it came from us. Like they're imitating us, and that's what I find more scary is that it's insidious. It's we're all doing it to a degree.
Do you think that because if it's from watching us and imitating us, but what happened to that's a grown-up thing to do, or that's grown-up behavior? Because I, of course, wanted to copy my mum growing up and loved to play with makeup and skincare, but I knew that I couldn't, like that some things were just for grown-ups. And same thing, like if they were having a glass of wine with dinner, I knew that I wasn't allowed to because that was a grown-up thing to do. So where did we fall so short with something being okay for grown-ups to do, which is maybe going on social media and filming ourselves and doing a 10-step skin routine? Where did that divide happen that suddenly it wasn't just saying to 10-year-olds, no, when you're older you can do that, to no, you can go for gold because we do?
I think that's about our obsession with youth as a society. I just think that the fact that you know we are looking to younger and younger people all the time. The celebrities are getting younger. The influencers, as we were saying, getting younger. So as we're obsessing over youth, and then brands are obsessing over youth, they have become this sort of center of the world. Whereas in previous eras, it was all about being in your 20s and you could aspire up. That's not happening. It sort of happened a little bit in magazines. Like if I think about my Dolly days when I was a Dolly, you know, it was always sort of written when I was reading Dolly, it was written for a 17-year-old. And then by the time I worked there, we kind of pretended it was for a 17-year-old, but we knew our readers were 13 years old. And then it became very openly for a very younger reader. And then all of a sudden nobody wanted it anymore. And maybe that becomes the natural end of this sort of obsession. Whereas if we market to them too much, if it becomes something that is meant to be for them, when women or young girls are always looking up and aspiring to be older, potentially it becomes something that they burn out on and they decide to reject more completely at some point. I don't know. Maybe that's being optimistic.
No, that's so true though, because I'm thinking I was, reading Dolly and pretending that I hadn't opened the seal section if mum sort of walked past. But then you
It's
get
a hard one to put back together.
Yeah. But or you'd like just lift it up a little bit, try to like peer under. So I was that person. I was reading Dolly, but then you get to a certain age and it's still in high school where you go, oh, I'm too grown up for that. That's like for little
Yeah.
kids. And then you moved on to the Cleo and the Cosmo. So there was the Dolly and Girlfriend and then Cleo and Cosmo. And then if you're a grown up, then you read
Yeah.
the Vogue or the Bazaar or then the Elle when it came out.
But it's a similar it is a similar sort of a market if you think about it, because my issue always when we worked on those teen magazines is that, okay, so if we're really young and then Cleo and Cosmo were talking about having sex and all these really kind of very grown up women type things to do.
10 tips to
The
give a blowjob.
17-year-old has nothing. And that's a little bit how I feel about the market today. If we're talking about if everything is either young and cutesy and fun and in fun packaging that looks like it could be chewing gum, but it's actually a retinol moisturizer. And then you're skipping straight up to, these incredibly luxurious, expensive products or deep plain facelifts. What is there for us in the middle who just kind of, have money and want to be marketed to in a sense, but sort of no one's paying attention.
Yeah, we're like the in,
Yeah.
invisible generation. No one's marketing towards us. It's and so many companies do say that they are trying to acquire a lifetime shopper, which I also think is very naive, really, or overly ambitious, because no one is that loyal, I don't think, anymore. Or they never really have been. It sort of is, yes, they'll always buy things that they like, but they can always be swayed by something shinier and new, or something
But
that's
I don't
exciting.
know that they're necessarily talking about a lifetime shopper for their single brand so much as a lifetime consumer in general who is
Yeah.
getting their validation from buying a product or their sense of self from constantly just needing to, feed that beast.
Yes.
Um,
And like
and I
starting them so young that they're starting that overconsumption at 14 instead of 24 or 34, when we sort of might
yeah.
have more traditionally started to have that little bit more play money to buy all of the little treats.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, I mean, it is starting, it's so incredibly young now. We're talking about
Mm.
9 and 10-year-olds who, are listing ingredients and doing their, get ready with me to go to
Yeah.
school. And, it's hard to watch.
Justine, I can't even imagine, like, your brain is just such a wealth of knowledge because you have been at the forefront of the biggest shift in media ever. And you've been, like, you've seen it firsthand. Like, what do you just find so interesting about it, and where do you see it going?
I mean, it is interesting with beauty. So I was a beauty editor. I started at a time when it wasn't really anything. It was a lot of repeated stories and, word salads. And then things got really interesting and the product started to actually work, and there were real things to report on. And then there was this sort of, self-love, diversification coming of age, the, democratization of beauty with influencers. Like, I've sort of kind of ridden all those pathways. I think I think now the interesting thing, and it may just be me being older, but I am so interested in every trend that comes up. It's not just coming from somebody deciding that pink is in and that's, what's happening next. It's all indicative of something bigger. And I'm so fascinated by where it all comes from. And I think what's, you know, it's I think you'd be foolish to ever try to predict what's coming next in these worlds. Um, but I definitely think that we are getting to a place where it's almost becoming a little subhuman. And look, this is not an optimistic take at all. Um, I think the rise of AI, particularly AI slop, and all the videos that are coming out in Sora, you know, I keep hearing from hairdressing salons that they're getting so frustrated because people are coming in and they're not even bringing in pictures. It used to be they'd be frustrated because you'd be showing pictures of hair that looks nothing like yours. Now we're showing pictures of hair that is not even real,
Mm.
and people don't even realize that it's not real. And I can see from my nieces who are so beautiful and young, but their makeup it's glassy, it's otherworldly, and so I do feel like there's this shift towards things that are just not human. And I don't really know where that goes, but I'm watching it with fascination, because if this is where it takes us, I don't know where you go from there. And it's the same with the 10-year-olds. If you have nothing to aspire to after 10 because everything's already marketed at you, where do you go from there? I think maybe in that case it might be a rejection, and you sort of turn away from it to a degree. But you know the world's changing so rapidly. Makeup has always been about being, beauty in general. It's always been about, I guess, putting on a show and reflecting the times that you live in, and these are the times that we live in. They're unsure, they're sort of a little bit chaotic, and we don't really know what's coming next.
Mm. It's kind of terrifying, isn't it?
It's a bit
I'd
doomsday,
like
isn't it?
to
I'm so sorry.
No, it's honest though, but I will add in, very earnest, but I would hope that humanity is always going to win overall, because at the end of the day, realness and authenticity surely has to mean something.
I think it should mean more than ever. It
Please,
should mean more
hopefully.
than ever before.
But yeah, we really appreciate your time diving into this with us, Justine. And honestly, if anyone wants to hear more from Justine's brain, and you definitely should, you'll have to sign up to her Substack. Like I said, we'll pop a link in the show notes because it's not just the beauty industry. She's got very interesting perspectives on it. It's many different things and great recommendations.
Oh, thank you very much.
If you've got an idea for a guest or someone who you're like, Cal, you need to pick their brain, let us know. Pop it in the comment section below and make sure you subscribe. Bye.